Join me on an inspiring journey through the world of fitness, health, and performance with the Genetic Coach, where I delve deep into the genetic foundations of athletic endurance, discovering how genetics is revolutionizing our understanding of human potential and how we can unlock our full athletic capabilities through a fresh perspective on conventional practices. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Genetic Coach. I must say I get really excited when we have episodes like today's, when we reach out and connect with everyday athletes in the real world who are using genetics in their training and seeing the differences. In my varied daily interactions as a coach, I'm finding that although many people know what genetic testing is, very few really know how to leverage the information from a genetic test and what difference it can make, not only for overall health, but in exercise and sporting performance. It's a subject that draws much interest, but there is a gap in seeing the translation. And this is where I just love listening to the stories of those who are actively engaging in the world of genetics. So genetic testing, we know, it not only gives us insight into our body's strengths, but it also highlights areas of opportunity in which we can tailor our environment and what we're doing with our bodies very specifically to make a difference in how we live out our genetic blueprint. So I'm very excited to be joined today by Jeff Hsu. Jeff was one of Genefit's early adopters. He is an endurance sports junkie and is always on the lookout for technology that may enhance his experience in his athletic pursuits and make him a stronger, faster, fitter athlete. Jeff is not a pro athlete, nor is he a beginner, but he sits somewhere in the middle where I think many of us find ourselves, our own biggest competitors. So with that, let's hear from Jeff about his experience with genetic testing and the impact it's had on his fitness journey. So welcome, Jeff.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
So Jeff, let's start off with just a little bit of background. So maybe you can just fill us in about, where you come from in terms of your training and athletic pursuits, and just give us an idea of the type of work you do and how you fit your training into everyday life.
Sure. I have always been interested in sports, played a number of high school sports growing up, and transitioned over to cycling was always a big passion of mine throughout high school, and picked it back up when I moved to Seattle in 2003. Found some friends, found a local racing club, started riding more and more miles, and that's really been the core of my endurance sports. It's kind of like weekend warrior. I'm 51 years old, so I knew the benefits of having some endurance training and some exercise on a weekly, daily basis was beneficial. But it was hard. It was hard to fit in the miles. It was mostly done on the weekends and not necessarily during the week. But racing every weekend from like February to July required more than just that. So I put miles in on a trainer in the basement during the winter time and rode with the team during the rain. But it's been a journey. It's the racing scene is pretty local, and I felt I wanted to get better and always trying to find ways to use the burgeoning kind of technologies, whether it be devices, wearables, better nutrition, better understanding, gels, and nutrition on the bike to improve. I've recently transitioned into running, and so that's been a great addition to that as well. It's been a fun journey for me. Yeah.
So what type of work do you do, Jeff? Have you got a desk-bound job? Are you moving around a lot during your day? Like, how do you fit your training and your running now that you are running? How do you fit it all into your day?
Yeah, I'm a software manager, software development manager. I've worked at Microsoft, brought me out to Seattle. I've also I've worked at Amazon, and now I work at PayPal. So I manage an engineering team. So your typical 9 to 5 job, sit in front of the computer for hours at a time. And that's why I picked up running. Running was a lot more efficient in terms of my time. I'm able to just I can run at lunch. I can run shortly after work. It doesn't require a lot of equipment. Getting the same kind of level of endurance workout could be achieved in an hour versus like several hours on a bike. And
Yeah.
so the efficiency of it was really what attracted me to start running. But I've been doing this for 20 years. And so it's just been sitting in front of the computer and that's having that exercise, whether it be in the middle of the day or at the end of the day is helpful to get through the days.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. So let us just explore a little bit about, your training and maybe the events that you've been taking part in. And do you follow like training plans as such, if you are working towards an event, or how do you figure out what kind of training you're going to be doing on a daily basis?
Yeah, I remember when I first started racing, I picked up the Racing Bible by Joel Friel.
Mm.
I think every local racer really kind of used that as a basis. You build a base, then you have your peaks, and you try to time your training to the event that you're trying to pin. And I think then the advances of like Strava and different online coaching came in. So I started picking up on those. Over the years, it's really hard to balance like a regimented training plan with everyday life. It felt like sometimes another job. I generally find my pattern to be find a race that I want to do or find some goal or achievement that I want to go for and then build a plan around it, but realize that there's going to have to be flexibility, not try to get stressed over not meeting those dates,
Mm-hmm.
not meeting those plans. And so that's it's kind of willy-nilly. There's not really in most recently, I've been interested in running certain races. I did my first marathon about 2 years ago, and that was kind of the goal I put out there. And while I followed a plan, things got in the way. The marathon was in November, so had to deal with like kids' school, fall sports, and the changing of the weather. That's generally my plan.
Okay, so you're not a coach. I mean, how did you deal with those periods where obviously life became a little bit frustrating and you maybe weren't able to do what you wanted to do in your training, and maybe you were falling behind your schedule, or how did you sort of figure out, okay, what's my next step if you didn't have a coach to speak to, if there wasn't somebody driving, the schedule for you? It must have been really difficult to kind of decide, well, I've had this setback, or maybe I've hurt myself a little bit, or maybe I'm a little bit sick. What do I do next?
Yeah, it was. On the basis, it's either self-driven or driven by my peers, whether that be my teammates, the team itself, or just self-driven. The real challenge was when I was training for the bike season or the race season, there wasn't really a measurement or a technology that could tell you where you were relative to your training peaks and valleys. You kind of did it by feel. And it was, oh, I feel great, I can keep up, or I feel terrible, I had a really hard ride today and I wasn't able to recover as quickly. So it was all a lot of like, guesstimations and just kind of based on feel. I
Yeah.
think in the recent past, we have a lot more data that allows us to kind of relatively gauge how you're feeling and how you're training compared to past years or past seasons or even the past week.
Mm, mm. I mean, yeah, so devices and smart devices, technology is really moving ahead at quite a pace. And a lot of these devices kind of give you scores and give you metrics that you can use in your training that kind of help you to see where you're going with your training, where you're coming from, and how to change things going into the future. Do you make use of a lot of those type of scores from your devices and the platforms that you're making use of at the moment?
Yeah, I remember my first real like epiphany was getting a power meter.
Ah,
It measures the strain that you put on your pedals in the bike, and that I think has revolutionized the sport in terms of how people train.
mm,
You can train a lot more efficiently. Before that, it was just I need to ride 3 hours a day. I need to ride 2 hours a day. But how hard do I go? How long do I go? All those things were kind of again left to the wind and trying to figure
mm,
out how to feel.
mm.
With power, I was able to know exactly how much I was putting into the effort and how much I needed to do. And so that was a real big, like heart rate was first, power was next. And then after that was all the syncing of all this data to make sense of it all.
Yeah, yeah. And now with the running, are you using any kind of power device with the running, or are you just using pace and heart rate?
Just pace and heart rate for now. Yeah, I haven't like I know there's some like shoe pods that you can put in
Yeah,
in your, but I haven't tried that yet. And
you
and
haven't.
the heart and pace kind of calculates a pseudo power, which is kind of neat because then I can now cross compare sports, but it's haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, it starts becoming a little bit more scientific, and you need to dig into it a little bit more. Were there, I mean, other than the frustrations of life getting in the way, have there been other frustrations in your cycling or in your running that you've come up against that maybe have confounded you, and you kind of, well, I'm not really quite sure where this has come from and how to deal with this? Can you give us insight into those kind of experiences?
Yeah, I have an issue with cramping, especially on the bike. I remember distinctly several races where I was at, the near the finish line and just completely cramped up. And I've been puzzled by what started this. I thought it was a lack of sodium and electrolytes. Then I thought it was a lack of water and then nutrients. And so it was constantly battling. And I literally can predict when a cramp will come on because it's almost like at a 2 hour mark, for example. So, part of it I realized is training. Part of it is training load and how little I was doing at the time. But the consistent issue that this would come up, especially during races, was something that really was frustrating. No matter how much I change my diet or change my training plan, it always seemed to kind of come in the worst times of the race. So that was what was kind of the recurring issue.
Okay. So moving on to just the genetic test then, where did your interest come from in terms of the genetic test? And did you know a lot about genetic testing before you took the test? Where did it all come from?
Well, genetic testing had started becoming part of the public dialogue with like the more of the ancestry or the 23andMe's to kind of just, trace your background and trace some of your history. And so that was kind of a novel idea that was that I had participated in buying one of those tests. But Tony is a college friend of mine, and he introduced me to the Genefit testing regimen, and I felt, hey, that sounded pretty interesting. And I have done several endurance events and have faced setbacks. I was kind of curious of whether I was genetic predisposition for endurance sports or for shorter sports. I've been a sprinter, a relatively fast person in high school, and because of my interest in cycling, I kind of took that turn and started racing. But racing requires more endurance, and there are sprint level, or like there's track events, and there's like criteriums that you can kind of take advantage of. So I was always kind of curious as to which side I fell on, right? Was I a fast twitch or a slow twitch athlete? And so that's why I took that test to kind of just understand, more about what my predisposition was.
Okay, awesome. So maybe you could share with us some of the insights that you gained and how it's changed your thinking, or, how it's given you maybe a little bit of extra direction, and what impacts it's had for you.
Yeah. My tests were interesting. It confirmed that I was an endurance athlete, although I know genes kind of tend to express themselves based on what environment they happen to find themselves in. So, over 15 to 20 years of, riding long distances, it may be just because of that. But more importantly was the recovery. I have an ability to recover pretty fast. And what was interesting is, given I can recover, I didn't feel like I was recovering, if that makes sense, right? So I know that my body could recover, but I wasn't doing the right things. And so the test kind of revealed some of the things I was lacking. I had a hard time with methylation. I had deficiencies in B vitamins, and being in Seattle, vitamin D. And so the real insight was, the understanding of where, what my body's predisposition was, and then where I'm lacking in terms of optimal performance. And then the next was, regimen of supplements to kind of fill in those gaps, right? Because it's so that was the big aha insight for me by taking that test. It was eye-opening, and knowing like, okay, now I kind of see where I can fit in and explain some of the things I've been struggling with for so long.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, a lot of people sort of have the idea that one should rather, for, in terms of supplementing, that we should rather go the route of natural food sources. That's really going to give us what we need, and to steer away a little bit maybe from, all the loads of supplements that we can take instead of having a good diet. I mean, where, with the recommendations that you got from your blueprint report, were you making big changes to your diet and what the type of foods that you were eating, or was it more about, including a bunch of supplements, or was it a combination of the two?
I'd say it's a combination. I'll admit I enjoy eating, and one of the byproducts of doing endurance sports is I can eat it. It's being able to eat anything. And I know as I've aged, and my doctors have told me that there are certain foods I should probably cut back on. I should probably have a more of a vegetarian diet. I tend to eat more red meat than most people. So these are the things that I knew, but the test confirmed. It also stressed the benefits of like leafy greens and legumes and all the things that, on all the benefits that I kind of knew, but it kind of put together the roadmap of how to get stronger, faster, but also live a healthier life, because you can supplement and change some eating habits. But admittedly, I haven't, for me, I've always enjoyed kind of eating what I wanted to eat and not putting that extra stress or pressure on folks around me because they have to accommodate my diet, my dietary needs. And so it's probably the third thing that I pay attention to, but everything else, from the training, the understanding of my body, and the supplements has really been kind of the focus point of the results.
You raise an important point there about aging. And I think, as younger athletes, we tend to go out and train as hard as we can. And we kind of don't really worry too much about recovery. And because our bodies are resilient, or more resilient at that stage, and can handle these type of things. And we don't really worry about what we're eating either. And particularly, I know with endurance athletes, we kind of use that as an excuse to eat more, to maybe eat a little bit badly, because I've consumed I've used so many calories in whatever activity that I've been part of. But I think once you get that genetic test and it's in black and white saying this is what your body struggles with, these are the areas you need to focus on, it really gives you a better sense of, okay, I'm going to really dial this information in now, and I'm going to take note, and I'm going to implement this, because there's so many strategies out there, in terms of what you should be eating as an athlete, and how you should be promoting your recovery, what supplements you should take, a real plethora of information. And it's really about, how do I take all this information, how to make it personalized for me, and I think you've highlighted that the genetic test absolutely does that, in making the information really unique and direct. And I think a lot of the time the information isn't mind-blowing information, but it's unique and personalized that really makes the difference.
Absolutely. I ride with two people that are very into the nutrition side of their sport, and they geek out over number of calories consumed and carbohydrates per gram, and I've tried to follow it. It doesn't always work for me, and since my body reacts and consumes nutrition in a different way, and so knowing that there is a blueprint, knowing that there is something personalized for me, has been helpful.
Okay. So let's just get to the activity part of the genetics. And you said that the test really did highlight that you are an endurance athlete, and I think what's important to note with the test is that it's not used to box you as an athlete, to say that you are an endurance athlete and that's the only type of activity you're going to be good at or can do well in. I think it's more about saying, okay, for your type of blueprint, the low intensity or low to medium intensity type of activities are going to give you the biggest increase in your VO2 max at the end of the day. And as an endurance athlete, that's what you're after, right? Increases in VO2 max. So for you, it meant that directing your training towards a specific type of intensity was what was going to make the difference for you at the end of the day. Now, I know that you did download and you followed one of the Genefit run training programs. At the moment, we do only offer run training programs, unfortunately, not the cycling for your cycling, but just give us a little bit of insight into sort of the type of workouts that you were doing, and how you progressed with the training with that, and what the outcome was?
Yeah, I used the Genefit run program to run my second marathon in May, almost 9 months after my first one, and I beat my time by almost 30 minutes. And
Wow.
the difference was more focus on medium to short runs at a certain pace, like being specific about how hard you ran rather than just going out for a 30-minute run.
Mm.
I think previously I was just trying to get endurance, and so it's just time on your feet, time on the road. But this time it was surprisingly, the program was less about running huge, 10, 12, 15-mile runs on the weekends, but more, short 3 to 5 mile runs that were focused on intensity. And they would be intense for a couple minutes and then a recovery period and then intense again. So that kind of structure and knowing that it was kind of tuned to my body's needs was nice to have. And I think a big reason why the times were so much better.
Okay, and you spoke a bit about recovery. Did you say that your genetic test highlighted that you actually recover quite well? And so that means you don't need to focus on extra sort of rest and recovery periods in your training. But were there specific things that you changed in your recovery protocols that made a difference for you training for this marathon?
I think there was a little bit more stretching involved. I started working in yoga to the regimen. I found that was a way to have an all body kind of recovery. I naturally have recovery periods built in because of the nature of my job and other things in life. I also fit in playing tennis like 2 to 3 times a week and an occasional bike ride. So in that training period, it was really intermixed with other sport disciplines to keep it interesting. So I
Mm.
think my body was always subjected to some level of stress, but in different ways. It wasn't
Mm.
just in years past, it was just cycling as many hours and miles as I can for the preseason. Whereas this has been nice in the sense that I had variety in my everyday
Yeah.
exercise and recovery periods built in just because of life.
Mm. Can we just talk a little bit about, so Genefit has what we call the session score, and that's a score that you get after each workout that you do. And that session score, being out of 100, gives you an indication of how productive your workout was for the day. So it kind of looks at your current fitness level. It also takes your genetics into account, and it gives you the score telling you, yes, you did really a really great productive workout today, productive in terms of increasing your fitness in the best way possible. Or no, hang on, this workout today was too hard, or it was actually not hard enough, or whatever the case is. Can you just talk us through your experience of that session score?
Yeah, that's actually been the best part of the whole training program. Because in previous training programs, it was always focused on that single sport. This one, I pair it with an Apple Watch. So Apple Watch, whether I'm hiking, cycling, playing tennis, running, it has all the different functions that feed right into the GeneFit app, and then it tells me, okay, that session contributed this way to your overall training plan, and that's how I've been able to mix in even like yoga, which is typically not your endurance training sport,
Mm.
but the fact that the GeneFit app allows you to intermix all these different disciplines and different sports and kind of gives you a composite view of how your training overall is going, and that session score kind of provides you insight directly into that session that you just completed. It's been really flexible, and it really is perfect for a person who's not necessarily singly training for one sport for that one event, but just wants an overall kind of fitness and overall kind of variety in their training.
Yeah. And to really know that the time that you're spending doing whatever you're doing is actually working for you, as opposed to working against you. And that's that's the pitfall that a lot of people fall into, is that, often there's that sort of thinking, well, I must just do more, I must go harder, I must go longer, and push myself more to get the outcome that I want. And often it's not the case. And I think, like you say, those session scores will, each day that you do that workout, will help guide you as to what benefit did my workout give me, and then what should I maybe consider for the following day or the next time I do a workout.
And
Also,
it accrues to a fitness score, which is nice because you can see over time, in May, my fitness score was in the 60s, for example, after I did the marathon, and then it waned as I recovered. And then as I picked it back up in another training block, you can see it grow. And so there would be days where, oh, I went on vacation, so I'm not able to do as much as I wanted to do. And so then the scores will go down. But at least as you pick up training again, whether it be in the actual sport or in the other activities, it will show that fitness score climbing again, so that you get a relative sense of like, okay, where am I compared to my peak in April, compared to my peak in May? How do I feel compared to that, and what do I need to do to get to that point before I race again?
yeah, and I think that's an important point, is that in your training, you can't be looking to just increasing fitness constantly all the time. You have to have those ebbs and flows where, you're working towards a peak, perhaps, in terms of your event. And then after your event, you've obviously got a little bit of downtime and you've got that fitness score that's coming down. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think definitely, the session scores also help just understand where you are at your training, and they are scored against your current fitness level, which gives great insights. Did you make use of the load balance score in Genefit at all? Did you, what kind of
Yeah.
insights did that give you?
Yeah, it gave me, it either pointed out the obvious, that is, I haven't done a lot of training, so I'm totally under load. But I think at the same time, what was interesting is, there were certain weeks in where I had events, or I played, I ran long and then I played tennis over and over again, or I had a long bike ride. You can tell that the muscles were overloaded. And more importantly to me, it was a way to say, hey, do I feel good? Should I back off? Do I need to change up my plan so I get a bit of a rest period before I start another block? But I paid attention to it in the sense that it alerted me to, what I needed to change in the plans going forward.
One of the big sort of revolutionary scores that is included in Genefit is the injury risk alert, and looking at your predisposition for connective tissue and muscle damage from the activities that you're taking part in. Can you maybe give us some insights into how you made use of that?
Those are critical scores for me, because everything is lower body related in the sports I'm playing. And I have ankles that have been injured through strain in past playing sports, and so I pay pretty close attention to the connective tissue number. If it's red, or there's a high risk of injury because of the load I put on the legs, I'll wear a brace, for example, while playing tennis.
Okay.
So I don't. So I'm extra cautious about rolling the ankles, and I'll protect them when I can, knowing that I'm going to be moving side to side and laterally, because the last thing I want to do is get injured before an event.
Yeah.
So it very much correlates. Like, there are moments where I can feel that I've just got just a weaker feeling in the ankles moving side to side, that I know if I were to not play with a brace, it could potentially lead to an injury that would.
Okay. And I assume you didn't have any injuries in your lead up to your marathon, your PB time marathon. You didn't have any ankle issues.
No, I didn't, thankfully.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. So just tell us, what devices do you make use of? I know you mentioned the Apple, but do you use Garmin at all to track any of your workouts? What is your preferred device, and what have you got synced to Genefit at the moment?
For cycling, I've Garmin devices that's hooked into a power meter and a heart rate monitor, and that feeds into Genefit. My running is mostly, if not all, done with Apple Watch, because it allows me to also include tennis, yoga, and cycling as well, and that all feeds Genefit as well. So trying to keep it simple. Too many devices to charge and bring with me is difficult, but so far the Apple Watch, have no complaints about it. The only thing is battery life. Longer runs to drain it.
Yeah, I find that as well. But to get the best use out of Genefit and its scores and its fitness metrics, you really want to be recording every workout that you're doing. Otherwise, you kind of have these gaps in your data. I mean, that's really great that you've got access to, you know, the Garmin devices plus the Apple devices for your workouts such as yoga and tennis and other things that, you know, you're not going to be recording on your Garmin, for instance. But yeah, we obviously do sync with the Apple platform, the Garmin platform, and the Chorus platform. Not the Chorus, the Polar platform, excuse me. And we are in development to increase those devices that we will be syncing with. So that's exciting news. But just to finish off, Jeff, for those people who may be interested in the genetics, but maybe are not quite sure about, you know, what does it involve actually taking the test? How invasive is it? And is the information really going to make much of a difference to me? What do you have to say to those people?
It's a simple test. I think it's a saliva test in a bottle, and the packaging is pretty self-explanatory in terms of how to get that sample and specimen back to the company. I think that the difference, you know, having done like a more of an ancestry-based genetics test, I think the difference from Genefit is that there's a readout, like where a professional will actually spend some time and read out your results. So you're able to interact with the questions that come up. That naturally come up because you know the idea of genes is not well understood. There's some areas that could take some time to really grasp, and everyone has different goals getting out of getting these results out. And so for some people it's just pure understanding of what nutrition or diet they should follow. Others like me I was just looking for some insights into my training and physical activity. And so having that professional to kind of guide you into that discovery and to understand what's next is super helpful, and I think the differentiator, at least in the two tests I've taken.
Okay, amazing. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed chatting to you and discovering how you are using genetics in your training. And I wish you much success in whichever other endeavors you're going to be taking on. Are you going to be getting onto the bike again soon, or are you going to stick to the running for now?
It's been a pretty amazing summer. I rode 100 miles about a month ago, and then 2 weeks ago I did a 20-mile hike in the mountains with friends, and I have a marathon coming up on Sunday, so that will cap off the summer. 2 marathons and a bunch of endurance events in the middle.
And then what do you do going into winter? Do you hibernate or do you get on your
I
indoor
think I take a
trainer?
long break. Yeah, take a long break and enjoy the holidays. Spend some time with family,
Okay.
and maybe do some indoor running and indoor sports.
Yeah, we'll keep it rolling, whatever it is, and enjoy it. I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, having fun, and being the best athlete for ourselves and breaking our own records. So yeah, wishing you all the best, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.